Hi, my name is Bill. This is the second part of the fifth section of my little silly series of videos, which might help you or might not. The last part was about knowledge, what it is, where it comes from experience, which is flawed. There are different types of knowledge, the degrees of certainty and doubt that I have accepted, and I would suggest we all accept. And now I'm like questioning, what's the point? Okay, I said all that stuff about being a flawed people. I've said all that stuff about our knowledge being potentially wrong. So what? Well, the answer is simple. It matters to me because I've made mistakes in my life. I have been the know-it-all in high school. I have been the one to get out, read a book, read a chapter, even read a paragraph, get a glimmer of an idea, and go about all over the place talking like I know, like I'm an expert on the matter, when obviously I wasn't. Since most people around me were not willing to consider anything, they're willing to just accept anything I have to say just by my force of will, which didn't really help me, because when I encountered somebody that actually knew something, I was put in my place. All of this know-it-all attitude I had when I was younger, up until I was like 34, I basically could say that I was seeking a certain validation and acknowledgement from others of my intelligence. To me, being intelligent was all I had, I guess. And I wanted people to see me as intelligent. And so learning things, discussing things, giving my opinion when it wasn't even asked was my way of saying, hey, I'm smart, I'm smarter than you are, and this is how I'm going to prove it. I'm not the only one that does this. Everybody knows somebody that does this. I did it, and I encountered a lot of other people that did it too. And more often than not, it created, how can I put it, awkward situations. I would say something, somebody would challenge me, I would get angry. Somebody else would say something, I would say something that would challenge me, I would get angry, and vice versa. And it got pretty nasty sometimes. And a lot of people, which I really liked, was really intelligent, I liked to have talk conversations with, it really didn't help. More often than not, we all suffer from this a little bit. Especially if I found this mostly in people that attend college and just get out of college. They have all this knowledge in them, no real work experience, and they go out into the world thinking they know it all. They're told they're smart. They are told they have everything. Reality is, they have knowledge, yes. Well, they have knowledge that they have stuff they're told is knowledge. And they were perhaps not as good of students as it could have been. Or perhaps, as I mentioned in the previous video, they failed in some aspect. They failed to see the truth. No, that's not the word. They failed to really learn. Or they had teachers that taught them incorrectly. Now, I like to touch upon this one point. I'm not the only one that has made mistakes in learning. I mentioned reading a book or reading a paragraph of a book and thinking I know something. There are people in the world with a lot of credentials. There are people in the world that have a lot of real on-hand live experience in a certain topic or skill. There are people in the world that seemingly have the answers. And I don't really care how many pieces of paper you have on the wall, how many years of college you spent in this field or that, how much time you spent in groups discussing topics, philosophy, economics, mathematics. I acknowledge that would give you a lot of credibility. I acknowledge that you probably have the answers that I don't have. I acknowledge that all those people that have all that experience might have more answers or more knowledge than I do. That goes without question. But what I do question is, have they or do they consider that element of being flawed? As I mentioned, experiences can be flawed. You can get bad information. You can make a mistake and miscalculate in an equation, as has been done numerous times in the past, no matter how smart you are. In other words, the process of making mistakes occurs to everybody. And just because somebody has a lot of pieces of paper on a wall, has a lot of credentials, has a big reputation, has 10 books written, it doesn't mean they haven't made a mistake in the past or currently hasn't made any mistakes, and in such a way that what they're teaching might be wrong. Now, people in the real world who don't have that big education, who actually have a profession and who work hard, a lot of them have a lot of professional skills, a lot of knowledge in a certain profession, and they too could be wrong. The manager that you work for, no matter how smart he seems, he could be wrong. Everything any human has ever learned has a potential for them to be wrong. Sure, you can trust the person that has the best reputation, the best credentials, but are you forgetting the fact that he's human? Are you forgetting that he's flawed? His knowledge is probably right, but should you just accept what he has to say? Or should you consider looking into it, researching it, and basically coming up with your own decision about it? Is the professor absolute in his knowledge? No, he is not. Is that teacher? No. You need to be the one to look at what is told to you and to question it. And that is why this whole section is important. Because as I am, and as I hope you understand a little, we are all flawed. Our experiences, the way we get knowledge is flawed, and the way we actually go about learning, even getting consensus from other similar minds, can be a flawed process. It's a very good process. It's very helpful, and more often than not comes out with real knowledge, but sometimes it doesn't, and we need to be aware of that. We're all flawed, and we all need to be aware that our knowledge, how we get it, is flawed. And therefore, it's important to remember to doubt some people, to sit back and question something. Just because someone says something is true, who has a lot of credentials, doesn't make it true. So a lot of these students coming out of university come out and they have all these answers they were taught. Maybe they never questioned it, maybe they did. I know some classrooms I've been in at the university, it allowed for some questions, but it was a very biased environment when I was there. If I asked a question they didn't like or they couldn't answer, it wasn't taken very well. I'm sure that hasn't changed. Now, this is the one thing that I think I want to make, the point I want to make that needs to be said. I said everybody goes through the same experience to get knowledge, an experience that potentially is flawed. The knowledge they get is potentially flawed, and they go on with life. I made mistakes. There's still things I'm pretty sure I'm wrong about, but have not got any correction on. But I just want to ask you to consider this. Irregardless of what anybody else, and yes, I know irregardless is not a word, but I like the word. It aggravates people sometimes. But irregardless of what anyone else does, or what they believe or don't believe, or how they accept information or knowledge, or question it. I'm going to ask you this one thing. Considering the way we get knowledge through experience, I would ask you to consider the possibility that no matter how certain you are, and my numbers I presented are arbitrary, you might have different numbers, remember, there's always doubt, which means there's always a possibility that you could be wrong. And if you ever engage in a conversation with somebody else, I would ask that you first listen and consider the possibility that you're wrong. Even if you're not, just consider you're wrong and listen. Be open to the possibility of being wrong. And by doing that, you might find it a little easier to determine what you know and what you think you know. And with that, I'll finish, because there's really not much more to say. Knowledge is good thing to have. We all need it. But I hope that you understand what it really is. And with that, I'll say goodbye. And remember, be better today than you were yesterday.